Bumpty. I'm an egg. Hi, I'm Flumpty Bumpty. I'm just kidding. I'm Jonathan, or Jonochrome, whatever you want to call me. And I made One Night at Flumpty's as a Five Nights at Freddy's fan game, and also as an inside joke. I've been overwhelmed by the response that this game has gotten already, just in the first couple of days of its release, and I'm really thankful for how the community seems to have embraced it. So I'm kind of making this video as both a playthrough for people who can't beat the game themselves, and also as just kind of an insight into what this game even is, because it doesn't make any sense. Of course, it still won't make sense after I explain it, but, you know, whatever. The story begins more with Birthday Boy Blam, the little guy with the pizza hat, more so than it does with Flumpty, because my friends and I online made this ongoing group comic with Microsoft Paint drawings, where one of us would make a few panels, someone else would pick the comic up from there, and we would just kind of make this stream of randomness that turned into some semblance of a story. And Birthday Boy Blam was kind of the origin of the story. And then he also met this other character who looked a lot like him but had a monocle and a top hat, and I think a bow tie and suspenders. I'm not really sure exactly, and that was Kevin Jr., even though there was no Kevin Sr., so whatever. I don't know where that idea came from, I don't know who came up with it, but I think in the story they were determined to be the same person but in different time periods. So in this game, Blam turns into Kevin Jr. on camera 2B, and they're just kind of the same person. And then somewhere in the story, I decided to introduce Flumpty Bumpty as just this random character who comes in and buries them both because they happen to be unconscious in pits next to tombstones. And he just goes, "Oh boy, I'm Flumpty Bumpty. Oh wow, there are people in these holes. I know what to do. I've always wanted to try this." And then he just accumulates a shovel out of nowhere and buries a giant pile of dirt on them. And as our comic story became more and more convoluted, I realized that the only way to explain everything that was going on was for Flumpty to be immune to the plot. So he just announces that he is, and then flies away. So I realized that if Flumpty is immune to the plot, and he's a fictional character and can therefore be in any story ever if he wants to be, then he can pretty much just bend the rules of time and space. He doesn't even have to follow the rules. So he's just this all-powerful egg who goes around killing people because he feels like it. And if you read the newspaper that The Beaver was reading, then it says that Flumpty kidnapped a person because he felt like it, and that person is supposed to be the player of the game, and you've been brought to Flumpty's House of Horrors, or whatever this place is supposed to be. I don't even know what it is. And someone asked me, if Flumpty can transcend time and space, then why is it that metal doors stop him? And honestly, they don't. It's just a limitation that he's given himself to make this experience more fun. In my mind, the story of this game is that Flumpty kidnaps you and wants to play a game with you, and if you survive, you become best friends. Flumpty does not have the best social skills. But then, I was addicted to Five Nights at Freddy's, mostly because of Markiplier, and that's why I decided to put his logo on the newspaper that the Beaver is reading. And I wanted to make some kind of Five Nights at Freddy's fan game, but I didn't know what kind of game to make it. And then all of a sudden I just told my friend, "Dude, Five Nights at Flumpty's." And so the idea immediately stuck, and I started working on it, but I decided to change it to One Night instead of 5, because that was one way of making this different from other Five Nights at Freddy's fan games that exist, and also I felt like it would have the appeal that Slender used to, where every time you played the game again, it got constantly worse towards the end, but you wanted to reach the end. And honestly, the Five Nights at Freddy's formula, to me, is already so perfect to begin with, that I felt like it was pretty much impossible to come up with original ideas for this. But I still tried my best to put kind of my own spin on this game, and I decided maybe that it could utilize the cameras more than other fan games might. But I just had to copy the Foxy mechanic from the first Five Nights at Freddy's, because I was just too happy with the idea of replacing Foxy with someone who is running out of toilet paper. I asked my friend Josiah Clark on Twitter, hey, if you put a living creature on a toilet, what would it be? And he said a beaver. And then I interpreted that as the abomination that you see in this game. Oh, I should add, almost everything in the main room of the game, like the detailed map of Utah, and the toaster, and the puddle of vomit, and the brain, that was a result of me direct messaging my friend Jake on Twitter, he's MetroidMan347, and also the one who made the death scream sound effect for this game, which I could not do any better. I just asked him to name off random objects, and so he did, and then I drew them all. And I am pleased with the result. And he gifted me the first 2 Five Nights at Freddy's games through Steam, which I'm very thankful for. And he's just all around a cool guy. The weird skeleton guy who comes to the left door at one point is the Redman, also known as the man who drank lava and lived, kinda. His design was one that I came up with a long time ago whenever I was trying to make a horror game, but I had no idea what kind of horror game to make, and then the idea just kind of collapsed. But I still liked the design, so I kept it, and then I used it in this game. I figured his arrival sometime after 3 AM in this game would be kind of an indicator that the game just got real, because he's so completely out of place from everything you've seen up until that point. For the record, Flumpty and Blam become active almost immediately in the night. Blam follows a set path. Flumpty is completely random. He can show up at the left door at any time. But if you close the door, then he leaves faster. And the Redman also follows a set path, but it's a different path from Blam's. The Beaver technically starts becoming active at 1 AM, but he doesn't really do anything until about 2 or 3, and he charges at the door every 2 or 3 hours, I guess. So he's a lot less sporadic than Foxy. And then I already had the Beaver, and I already had the Redman, so I didn't want to name the Clown, so I named it Grunkfus, because that's the first thing that came to my mind. He gets a little bit closer every time you lift the camera up, and if you lift it up too many times, then you die. And you can tell how many times you have left by looking at the number of eyes in the pit on camera 5. And that might be too subtle, but it was a cool idea to me at least. I thought about just having Ronald McDonald crawl out of the poster on the left, but I wanted to utilize the hole in the wall in some way, so I changed it. And Grunkfus is totally a better clown. Before I really started brainstorming ideas for this game, I thought that maybe all the monsters could just be variations of Flumpty, just different Easter eggs. And I didn't end up using that idea because I thought it might be a little bit too repetitive, but I was excited for the idea of Golden Flumpty because I thought I wanted something like Golden Freddy in the game, and I realized that Flumpty is an egg and there are golden eggs, so I put that in the game, and I kind of accidentally based his design off a boss in Persona 4, which I haven't played, but anyone who has played it might know what I'm talking about. This game was a lot of fun for me to make, but it was also quite a challenge for me to make, because it's not like anything else I've made in the past. I've never really made games where death is much of a consequence before, and I've also never made a full game in Game Maker Studio before. I'd always used Flash, and so that's a little bit of a different experience. And I'd also never made a horror game before, so I managed to jump scare myself plenty of times making this. I also learned new sound design techniques, which is something I'd never really thought deeply about in the past. And I also had this self-imposed artistic challenge to not include any green on the characters or in the environment of this game. So, there's no green anywhere. Jake told me to draw a cactus, I made it blue. And even though I considered this kind of a side project to other things I was working on, I was really invested in it and ended up finishing it in about 19 days. It was 20 days from the concept to completion and release, except there was one day in which I had to work on an English paper, so that was dumb. There were a few ideas that I had for this game that I didn't end up using, like Jake making a phone call saying that he was Jake from State Farm sometime in the middle of the night, but I felt like that would kind of detract from the mood too much, so I didn't keep that idea. And then the Max a Few Trades said something about rap music playing in the distance upon seeing the beaver, and then I thought about maybe including that, but I didn't. I thought about making it so that if you clicked on the nose of the Ronald McDonald poster, it honks like Freddy's nose in Five Nights at Freddy's, but I didn't do that. And then the thought also crossed my mind of making an unlockable Night 2 that's just the same thing but harder, except I really don't think it's worth it. I think it's fine how it is, so don't expect that. So this was an enlightening and enjoyable project for me to work on, and I can't thank Scott Cawthon enough for making Five Nights at Freddy's and being such an inspiration to me to pursue making original things, but I had to make this unoriginal thing first. So there you go. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you later. Hello everyone, and welcome to the One Night at Flumpty's 2 developer commentary. I have a lot of things that I want to say, and I don't know how to get through it all, but I'm going to start by saying that whenever I made the first One Night at Flumpty's, I really just made it as a joke. I didn't try to make it super original, I didn't expect it to get the following that it did. It was just me parodying Five Nights at Freddy's with a character that I made up with my friends a year ago, and apparently people enjoyed the first game enough to want a sequel, and so I started thinking about one. But one problem that I had with One Night at Flumpty's personally was I didn't really feel like it was original enough. It was too derivative of Five Nights at Freddy's. So I thought if I was going to make a sequel, I wanted to make it something new, something fresh that hopefully people haven't seen before or played before. And I didn't really have many ideas. The only idea that I had at the time was the idea of replacing the phone call and the fan in the background of Five Nights at Freddy's with a record player that plays music. And I liked that idea, and I wanted to use it, but I didn't have anything else to really go on. Until one night, not at Flumpty's, but at a relative's house that I wasn't really used to staying in, I couldn't really sleep very well, and whenever I finally did get to sleep, I only slept about an hour, because I had a nightmare. In the nightmare, I was in a sort of garage-type place, and there was a light switch in front of me that turned the lights in the garage on and off. But then there was also a hallway in front of me that sometimes monsters of some variety, I don't know what they looked like because I don't remember, but sometimes monsters would come by and they would look into the room, and if the light was off then they wouldn't see me. But one time I had the light on and one of them just charged at me and I woke up abruptly, and I thought, well, I guess that must be a One Night at Flumpty's 2 dream, because I can't imagine what else that would be. And I just took it as a sign that apparently One Night at Flumpty's 2 has to exist. So I started drawing the quote-unquote office of the game. The office alone took about a week to draw, and I called upon my friend Jake, or MetroidMan347, one more time to tell me what kind of random crap that I should draw in the room, and I came up with a lot of ideas myself this time for things to draw, but a lot of it still came from him. Which reminds me, in the first game there was the cactus that I made blue because, aside from a few exceptions, I decided to try to avoid green as much as possible in the first game. In this game I avoided the color blue, and I have a blue whale that I intentionally made green, just because. But yeah, I drew the room, and it is very similar to how it looked in my dream, and then I decided to add vents to it because Taste Gaming made a video on the first One Night at Flumpty's, and he had the suggestion that maybe the beaver in that game, who works like Foxy, it might be cool if he came from either door, the left one or the right one, in the game, instead of just always coming down the same hallway. And I decided to incorporate that idea into One Night at Flumpty's 2 with the vents and the owl, and I really think that was a good idea, and I thank him for that. Go check him out, he's a very jolly guy. But then, at around this time, I kind of lost some steam with the project because I played Five Nights at Freddy's 2 for the first time, and it made me realize that the ideas that I'd been coming up with for the game weren't really original enough, and perhaps weren't intuitive enough either. The initial ideas that I had for this game were for the characters to just kill you on the spot if they saw you and your light wasn't off. And I also thought about having Grunkfist the Clown just be another wind-up music box thing, but that idea's been kind of done to death in fan games at this point, and I also don't really like that mechanic to begin with anyways, because I feel like there's too much maintenance with it. You have to worry about it every single second. I didn't know what to do, so I took a break, and I had another inspiring dream. This time it was a Super Mario Sunshine 2 dream, for some reason. And in the dream, anytime Mario was seen by an enemy, there was a bar in the bottom right corner that increased, and whenever it reached full, all the enemies started attacking him. Just kind of think like all the enemies attacking him like the Cuckoos in Ocarina of Time attack Link. So I wake up from the dream, I think that was weird, and then about 7 or 8 hours pass, and I think, wait a minute, I can use that idea! And so that's how the exposure meter got into the game, and it's in the same place that it was in my dream. And I felt like just incorporating that added this new realm of possibility to the game. Another thing about Freddy's 2 that I don't care as much about is how much of the game is based on quick reflexes, because in the later nights, if you make a split-second error, then you're dead. And I felt like the exposure meter kind of prevented that from happening with my game, and that's one thing I liked about it. One thing that I love in the first Five Nights at Freddy's is the power mechanic, because everything that you do affects the power, and at the end of the night it's so much more tense than the beginning because you have almost no power left. And I really like that feeling of tension, and I felt like the exposure bar and how it can never go down kind of helped to bring that feeling of tension back that I kind of missed from the second game, and to an extent the third one as well. One thing that I deeply appreciate about the first Five Nights at Freddy's that isn't so present in the second one is how every character is unique in how they function in the game. You can kind of develop this weird relationship with each one of them individually because they all behave differently, but in the second game there's less of that because more of them behave the same way. So that's kind of a rule that I set up for myself, is I wanted every character to be uniquely distinguishable by the way they behave. One of the common complaints with Five Nights at Freddy's and its fan games is that the camera doesn't really have enough of a use. I wanted to change that with my game. I sort of tried that with the first game, but I didn't really put the same effort into it as I did this one. And so the owl is one reason to look at the cameras. Grunkfist the Clown, I decided to have a timer that you had to pay attention to for him. Then I also added the Red Man pop-up. I thought that that was kind of a fun idea. And as for other characters like Blam and the Eyesore, it's helpful to look at the cameras for those characters because you can just turn off the light really fast if they're coming, but if you know that they're coming, then you don't have to waste any exposure at all. So I guess for posterity, I can try to explain how all the characters work in detail. Flumpty starts moving almost right away, but he doesn't actually have a chance of entering your room for the first, I think, 30 seconds. Like in the first game, every time he moves, it's to a completely random location, and he has, I think, a 15% chance of entering your room. And I knew that if I was going to have Flumpty be completely random in this game, I needed to have some kind of delay before he makes your exposure go up, and so I added a peekaboo animation that I hope is quick enough to be startling, but slow enough that you can respond to it without raging at the game. The owl is also active almost right away, partly so that you can learn how the owl works, and also because if the owl wasn't active almost right away, then there wouldn't be a reason to ever turn the lights on, so I felt like that was important. The owl will stay in camera 3. If you don't see him in camera 3 anymore, then he's in one of the two vents in camera 4 or 5, and whichever one he's going down, you close that vent in the room. He's a little bit more likely to go to the vent that is open than the one that is closed, but he can go through either at any time. If you happen to look at the camera that the owl isn't going through, then you can just close that vent and you're given extra time before the owl hits the vent. Birthday Boy Blam becomes active around 1 o'clock, and he makes a constant cycle around camera 6, camera 3, and camera 7, and then he enters the room again. He just makes a circle, and if you see him in his Kevin Jr. fancy attire in camera 7, then that means he's about to enter the room. If you see him disappear from that screen, then you have a really short span of time before he actually enters the room and sees you, so you can turn off the light in that time. And you shouldn't ever have to do this, but you can turn the light on if he's starting to walk away, because he's not looking at you anymore. When you see the hole appear in the left side of the room, that means that Grunkfist is starting to lose his patience. You can see what his patience level is in camera 2. The moment it hits 0, he will pop out of the hole in the wall on the left, and Your exposure will go up faster than it will for Flumpty or Blam because he's closer to you, so it's more easy for him to be aware that you're there. And because the game runs at 30 frames per second, which is a choice that I made because it made the game run faster, the timer also goes down 30 every second, so that might help you keep a mental note of how fast it's going down. Redman.exe, just a pop-up, click cancel when it appears. If you don't, then you'll have a few seconds to see a red screen of death, and then he'll kill you. I programmed the pop-up where it shouldn't ever appear whenever it's impossible to click cancel. You should always have time to react to it before any of the characters look at you in the room. The eyesore, kind of and kind of not a character returning from the first game. He will stay in camera 1, but if you see him crawling out of the hole in camera 1, then that means he will start coming towards you in the next minute or two. Then he will move to camera 3, and then camera 6, and then to your room, in a relatively rapid fashion. So you want to make sure that if you see him in either of those cameras, he will be at the room in about 20 seconds or less. In the normal mode, he'll only appear once, sometime after 4 AM, but in hard-boiled mode he's much more active. And then the last character is Golden Flumpty. He starts having a reasonable chance of showing up after 4:30 or so, and if you look at him for too long without either turning off the light or flipping up the laptop screen, then he will kill you, kind of like Golden Freddy does. There are a few recurring questions that I have seen with the characters, like, why doesn't the eyesore move around in the first game? And that's because whenever I made the first game, the pile of eyes in the floor in that one room, it's just a pile of eyes. That's how I drew it. It wasn't intended to be a character. But then people thought it was a character, and I thought maybe I could turn it into a character. And it took me a while to come up with a design to match those eyes, because everything that I came up with was just kind of like that monster in Monty Python and the Holy Grail that has a whole bunch of eyes. But then I thought of the idea that I once had, where the eyes represent people that Flumpty has killed in his game of bringing people into his house and having them survive the night. So I had the terrifying idea of just making the eyes a beast of corpses, and I made it a dinosaur because I liked the pun eyesore. The eyesore character is elaborated on a little bit in the newspaper that you get after hard-boiled mode. And another big question is, where did the beaver go? Because the beaver is the only character in the first game who doesn't reappear in the second one. I just really wanted the eyesore to be a character, and I valued the balance of the game's mechanics over total consistency between the games. So whenever I brought eyesore into the game as a character that moves around, and whenever I replaced the beaver with an owl because owls can see in the dark, and that made sense with the whole turning off the light mechanic, I didn't really have room to put the beaver in the game and have it still make the game feel nice. So I have an Easter egg in the game that shows up rarely if you start it up, where you just see a gravestone that says the beaver is dead because he fell down the toilet. I just knew people were going to ask about the beaver, so I had to come up with some kind of explanation for why he's not there, and that is the explanation that I came up with, as stupid as it is. In addition to the beaver, there was actually another character that I scrapped for the game, who was a blind character. I just thought about having a blind character wander from camera 1, eventually reaching your room, and then just kind of wandering past it. And the idea was that if you didn't make any noise, then he wouldn't notice you. But I ditched that idea because sound doesn't really play nearly as huge of a role as the light does, and it would really slow down the gameplay to just not do anything as he passes by. And I might recycle the idea of a blind monster into another game someday. Maybe not a Five Nights at Freddy's fan game, but just a game sometime, because not that I'm the first one to come up with the idea of a blind monster, I just think it would be cool to try and see if I could use that sometime. As far as hard-boiled mode goes, I didn't think that if I was going to make a sequel to One Night at Flumpty's that I was going to have 2 nights, because it just kind of feels weird to have a second night if the whole idea is that it's one night. But I guess whenever I made this game and I felt like it wasn't something that people had played before, I wanted to see what people would do with a hard mode. Like, if I made a hard-boiled mode of the first One Night at Flumpty's, which I won't, I don't know what would make it any different from Night 6 or Night 7 of Five Nights at Freddy's, but this actually felt different to me, and so I was happy to make a hard-boiled mode, also just to see how I enjoyed it myself, and how much trouble I would have with it. And it was kind of crazy to me because I programmed the whole game not really actually playing it until it was almost done. I just tested bits and pieces of it along the way, but until the end, it didn't all come together and I didn't actually play it for myself. I was impressed with how it turned out. I didn't expect it to be as tense as it is. And I feel like I must have gotten lucky with it, because one of the hardest things for me to do is make a game that I still want to play after I've spent a long time working on it. But I got addicted to hard-boiled mode and tweaking parts of it to make sure that it was possible. I promised myself that unless I beat hard-boiled mode myself, I wouldn't release the game, and so it took me about 3 hours, but I did it. The recording you're seeing now is my second time beating it. People have a strategy where they just keep the lights off as much as possible and only really pay attention to the owl and the red man pop-up, and maybe also Grunkfist the Clown. And I guess that's a strategy that works. I don't think it's 100% reliable. I prefer to play the game paying attention to all the enemies at once, but, you know, play it however you think works. I kind of think of One Night at Flumpty's 1 as a parody game, and I see this one also as sort of a parody, but more as a tribute. Because I admire Scott Cawthon's work with Five Nights at Freddy's so much, just because of their game mechanics and how they're different every time. I like the story of the games too, but it's not really the biggest appeal to me compared to the game mechanics, and that's probably part of the reason why I didn't really focus on the story as much in making One Night at Flumpty's. But making this game was kind of my way of saying, this is what I feel like I've learned from playing Five Nights at Freddy's and being inspired by the games. Whereas the first One Night at Flumpty's was more or less a joke, I really poured myself into this one and I took it seriously as a project. To kind of cap it all off, whenever I had the record player idea, I knew that I wanted just light, happy classical music to be playing in the background as something that shouldn't be creepy, but it is. And I just kind of made this mock-up classical music that's not a reference to anything in particular. But then for hard-boiled mode, I had the idea to remake the Toreador March, or the Toreador song, which is a tune from an opera, but it's also the tune that plays when Freddy appears at the door in Five Nights at Freddy's 1. And it was so much fun to remake it in a classical-ish style. So that's another homage to Scott Cawthon's genius. For the people who have asked, I made the artwork in these games with Flash 8. That's kind of my art program of choice, and animation program. The game itself is made with Game Maker Studio, mostly using GML, not so much drag and drop stuff. And I'm not sure that anyone's asked this, but the music in both games was all made in FL Studio. So, I'm very happy with how this game turned out. It turned out better than I expected. I'm hesitant to say that I'm proud, because while I can practically credit the whole creative process of the game to myself, there's still so many people that I have to thank, because without them this game would not exist. I want to thank www.wario for making Five Nights at Wario's, because the moment I saw that, I was inspired to make One Night at Flumpty's, because I realized that it would be fun to make, and if Five Nights at Wario's exist, then why not Flumpty's? Both of those are kind of equally absurd concepts, although I don't mean that in a bad way, I just think it's fun. And I also just think that www.wario, or Andy, is a very nice guy, and he was supportive of One Night at Flumpty's too, and so I had to thank him both in the special thanks in the menu of the game, and also I decided to draw his morphed Five Nights at Wario's Luigi in the background of one of my One Night at Flumpty's 2 rooms. Again, Taste Gaming without his spur-of-the-moment idea to have a Foxy mechanic with 2 hallways. Without that, this game probably wouldn't exist either. I have Dawko to thank for being supportive. I have Dalek Puncher to thank for the Red Man scream. I brought up on Twitter that I didn't have any jump scare screams for One Night at Flumpty's 2 yet, and I wanted there to be multiple ones. I didn't want them to all sound the same this time. And Dalek Puncher gave me a sound that I had to edit a little bit, but it worked perfectly. So big props to him for that. That was really helpful. I have my friends to thank, like Jake, for the assistance of the creation of Flumpty Bumpty, and he was helpful in the beta testing process, even though this game didn't have much of a beta testing process. And again, just Scott Cawthon, He's inspired me in ways that I would have never thought possible, from a game in a genre that I used to not even really care for. He's a truly amazing guy, and I wish him the best. As a side note, people have asked here and there to see the comic that I made with my friends where Flumpty, Bumpty, and Birthday Boy Blam originated, but a lot of that comic was lost a while back, and I don't think it's retrievable, so I'm sorry about that. I don't even remember how Flumpty and Blam met. It had nothing to do with Five Nights at Freddy's, I can tell you that much. Now, one more big question that's on people's minds is, will there be a One Night at Flumpty's 3? I can't entirely dismiss the possibility of one, but I don't think I'll make one. It's just that this one took a lot out of me, and I feel like everything that I really wanted to do with the first One Night at Flumpty's that I didn't, I ended up doing with the second one. The response that this one has gotten has been unreal. It's the top-rated game, or top-rated Five Nights at Freddy's game on GameJolt right now, which is a huge honor. And it feels like if I made another one, then it would only go downhill from here, and I don't think I would have as much fun making it either. I don't want to feel like I'm obligated to make a third One Night at Flumpty's just because there are 3 Five Nights at Freddy's games. And if there's a 4th Five Nights at Freddy's game somewhere in the future, then would I have to make a 4th One Night at Flumpty's? I just want to be able to work on original projects. Because after all, Five Nights at Freddy's was an original project. That wasn't a fan game of anything. Scott made that on his own merit, and I like making fan games, but I want to focus on projects that aren't fan games. So I guess we'll see how that works out. Anyways, say what you will about Five Nights at Freddy's, but the community surrounding the series is one of the most amazing groups of people I've ever known, and I am incredibly grateful for the opportunities that I've been given to have so much fun making these fan games and to see people enjoy them the way that they do. It's really been a wild ride. So thank you all very much for watching and playing, and I will see you in whatever we do next.
Hi, I'm Flumpty Bumpty. I'm an egg. I'm immune to the plot, and I can transcend time and space. Also, I'm coming after you. You can figure out the rest. Have fun. welcome one and all the Flumpty Bumpties. If your light's turned off, then you're safe. If your lights are on, then they'll come find you and rip you a brand new face.
So, as is to be expected with the announcement of 1 week at Flumpty's, or the multiple announcements by now on different websites, people have been wondering why I'm making a third game when I said that I wasn't going to. And I'm not technically making a One Night at Flumpty's 3, but it is a legitimate question, so I'm going to try to address that in this video. And it's not going to be the most upbeat video because this is actually kind of a hard topic for me. But first I want to address why I said that I wasn't going to make a third game in the first place. Whenever I made One Night at Flumpty's 2, and I made the developer commentary, I said that I didn't think there was going to be a third game because I kind of used up all the ideas I had for a One Night at Flumpty's style game, and I wanted to try to move on to other more original things if at all possible. I wanted to just, leave those fan games behind and then keep moving forward. And I then made a frequently asked questions video, which it wasn't really much of a video. Everything was in the description. But in the description of the video, instead of saying it probably wouldn't happen, I said that a One Night at Flumpty's 3 would not happen. And the reason I said that with such certainty is not because I was sure that there wouldn't be another game, even if it wasn't in a one-night style. And it wasn't even because I wanted the third game to be a surprise. I didn't have it in mind at the time. I just didn't want people to ask more questions. And that's kind of a terrible thing to say, but it's the truth. I just wanted people to kind of shut up about a third game. And I hate that. I hate that I said that, and I hate making promises that I can't keep. Because even if it's a good promise to break, like, oh, well, I'm not going to make any more games in the series that people seem to like. Oh, it turns out I am. Well, it's still a promise that I'm breaking. And a promise that I break is an indication that I shouldn't have made that promise in the first place. So, I don't mean to be a liar. I really don't. And this kind of thing has been haunting me for years. Because years ago, I made Riddle School. And I made one game and people wanted to see more, so I took what I made and tried to expand upon it. And then people said, make a third one. And so I spent a long time making a third one, and I took a hiatus in the middle of it because I didn't have enough ideas. And then whenever I finally finished it and released it and people seemed to enjoy it, they still asked for more of them. And I knew that I wasn't going to make a Riddle School 4. I just knew that I wasn't. But in my mind, that meant I wasn't going to make another game where you're a kid who escapes school, because that was something that I'd kind of done to death already. What I didn't know was that I was going to make a Riddle School 4 in which you click a button and then you die instantly, and that's the whole game. And I also didn't know that I was going to make a Riddle School 5 that takes place in space for some reason and has entirely different rules. And even after I finished that, and I thought that I'd given the series the perfect ending, people still wanted a Riddle School 6. And I thought, where could it possibly go from here? How could I top what I just did? And eventually I had the idea to make an entire series, which would be Riddle Transfer, and I made one game and I released it and never picked it up again. I had 5 planned. I'm never going to make them. It's just never going to happen. And I can say that with certainty because it's been years now and I've still had no inclination to pick it up. And even in times when I've thought, hey, maybe I should go back to that and surprise people, it just still hasn't happened. I have no interest. If it ever happens, it's going to be way down the road, and it's going to be when people have long forgotten about it. But I don't want to repeat that same mistake again. I ended the series at the wrong time, and I know that I did. And I made promises that I couldn't keep. So, right now, I am making 1 week at Flumpty's with the intention of it being the last game in the series, which is why I said in my recent teaser that I posted that it's the final installment. Do I know that it's the final installment? No, I don't. Do I know that it's going to be finished? No, I don't. Because anything can change with time, and I only say that it's the final installment, and I say that I will finish it because that's what I really want. I really want it to be finished, and I really want it to be the last game. I can say with confidence that those things will happen, but not certainty. I just really want to be able to say that 1 week at Flumpty's is a satisfying send-off for the series, People will play it and say, you know what, this is good. We don't need any more after this. Even though I know people will still ask for more, and that's kind of the curse of making a series, or making anything. And I'm not the only one with this problem. Egoraptor, he said, you know what, I'm going to make Metal Gear Awesome 3. It's going to be the next thing I finish. And he said that several times, and it's still not done. And it's probably never going to be done because, well, he's working on other things now. He's working on Game Grumps. He's working on Starbomb. He's doing animations for completely different things. He's pretty much left that behind. Someone on Newgrounds, who I think went by the name Little Deuce 9, made a series called Final Fantasy Daycare, and there were 5 of those, and then he started making a whole new series called Final Fantasy Jailbreak. And he made one part, very much like Riddle Transfer, and stopped, because he just didn't want to make any more, and now he's working on different things. And he's been doing that for years. I'm just terrified, for a number of reasons. I'm terrified of ending something when it's anticlimactic. I'm terrified of taking something too far and beating a dead horse. And I'm terrified of getting addicted to one thing and not being able to move on to other things. People used to only know me as the guy who makes Riddle School games, and now everyone only knows me as the guy who makes One Night at Flumpty's, which is a cycle I guess I will have to endlessly accept, but when I say that I want 1 Week at Flumpty's to be the last game, even though I don't know if it will be, I mean it. I want to learn how to move on. I do have a couple of ideas that I'm inspired to work on after 1 Week at Flumpty's. Neither of them are Flumpty related. One is a game that is just kind of a concept that I would like to play around with, and it's in a genre that I haven't really done anything with before, and I think it just could be fun. And then there's another game that I've been working on for about 5 years, and it's still nowhere close to being done, and it's barely even started. I'm not going to say anything about it because it's a top secret project, and it's very dear to my heart, and it's the game that I most want to finish. But it's also a very difficult game to make, and I know that it's going to take forever, so every second that I don't work on it feels like a waste, even if I'm making something else. And that's another difficult thing about being me. I'm very thankful that people enjoy my work, and I never want to stop making games, because I believe it is my passion. It's just not all fun and games. Okay, well, maybe I should actually answer the question that I opened with now. Why a 1 Week at Flumpty's? Part of it is I really just want to end the series properly, like I said, and I feel like having a week-long game instead of a night-long game is probably the best way to do that. And also I wanted to experiment with the concept of a 5-night, or in this case I guess it has to be 7-night game, because there's a build-up there that you can't get with one night. So, yeah, I want to play around with that. I think it'll be different. I hope it will be interesting. And, yeah. I'm having a lot of fun with it so far, and I sincerely hope that it is enjoyed. So, thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you later.
I gave it a solid effort, but it was not meant to be. I don't enjoy canceling games after I've announced them. This isn't the first time I've done it, or the second time, or the third time, as far as I can remember. But it's never easy. Relatively speaking, though, I feel pretty at ease with this decision. Whenever I started making 1 Week at Flumpty's, the biggest motivator for me was just Five Nights at Freddy's 4 hype. Because it was announced and everyone was really excited, like, goodness gracious, Five Nights at Freddy's 3, we thought that was maybe the end, but it turns out there's one more. That's gonna be amazing. We need to theorize about what it'll be like. We need to play all the past games again and get ourselves into it, and, you know, it was just a really exciting time. I wanted to kind of join in on that, because I like the idea of giving people something to be excited about. And I could, you know, make a new game about something entirely different that no one has ever seen before,
Or I could go back and maybe make one more Flumpty game, and people would be excited for that because it's in a universe they've already seen before and they know about and are familiar with. That was my main motivator for 1 week at Flumpty's. I went into it with almost no ideas, and I announced it whenever I'd done almost nothing with it. Like, I thought about waiting longer to announce it because I hadn't done anything with it and I wasn't really sure if I was going to complete it yet. But I got impatient just being excited about the idea of other people being excited. And that's probably something that I shouldn't have done, but it was too late once I'd done it. I did initially have fun working on it, though, because I had some ideas, not very many, but I thought I had just enough where I could plow through as much of it as I could, and if I ever lost motivation, then I could say, well, I've done so much in these first 1 or 2 weeks of production that anything that I've done so far, it can't go to waste. I have to keep going. It's too late to stop now. That was the mindset that I went into. So, with One Night at Flumpty's 2, I kind of went in with the assumption that I was just going to make up ideas as I went along and it would work out eventually, and it did. 1 week at Flumpty's, I tried the same thing, and it just didn't work out. That's kind of what you get whenever you don't plan things out well enough. It might work and it might not. It took me developing and programming a whole map system, drawing 15 rooms, or technically 16 I guess, because of the office, but the office was never finished, and drawing Birthday Boy Blam, I think 19 times or something like that. It took me that long to realize that there were just inherent problems with the way that I designed the game, and it was too late to fix them unless I wanted to make some huge changes. Basically, I designed the game around the ability to be able to move around bits of hallways and turn on these laser beam doors that pretty much act like the vents in Five Nights at Freddy's 3. So I did that, and I realized that it was very easy to just trap the character or the characters between walls and just have them get stuck forever, and then there's no challenge anymore. In fact, there's no challenge to begin with, because there's nothing else stopping you from doing anything to that effect. So it just... I wasn't having fun making the game, and my own philosophy that I've kind of developed over time is if I'm not having fun making something, then it won't be fun for people to play. I wanted to challenge that this time. I wanted to see if I could still make an enjoyable game even though I wasn't enjoying working on it, and it turns out that I didn't see the mistakes in it because my heart wasn't in it. And the mistakes that I did see, I had no interest in fixing, so I weighed my options. I either had to cancel 1 week at Flumpty's and save myself a whole lot of stress and disappoint people, or spend forever making 1 week at Flumpty's, completely stress myself out, and still disappoint people. So I chose the former option. As sad as the news is, it's also a huge relief for me, because I, of course, am relieving myself of a whole lot of stress that I went through trying to make this game that I just don't want to do anymore. And also because I feel like One Night at Flumpty's 2 is a perfectly adequate ending. I don't feel like it needs a continuation, and so I'm glad that I ended it how I did, because it doesn't feel like by discontinuing the series where I am, I'm leaving it incomplete. It just feels like I'm leaving it off where it ends pleasantly in people's memories. It's also a relief to me because One Night at Flumpty's is a parallel of Five Nights at Freddy's. One Night at Flumpty's 2 wasn't intended to be, but still kind of ended up being a parallel of Five Nights at Freddy's 2. And the third One Night at Flumpty's game, aka 1 week at Flumpty's, pretty clearly resembles Five Nights at Freddy's 3, even though I tried to make it as original as I could, but if I had finished it, then people would just say, well, you copied the first 3 Five Nights at Freddy's games, now copy the 4th one whenever it comes out on Halloween. And that's not really something I want to do. To be honest, I've grown really tired of the Flumpty characters. I still like them, but I just don't want to do anything else with them. They're always jokes. In my mind, they always will be jokes. And I don't want to continue to make games only about characters that didn't really have much of a serious thought process behind them. I guess that's another thing, is I considered making it a more serious game, because I had more nights to work with and therefore I could make more of a story develop. Since people will be curious, I'm gonna explain what the story of 1 week at Flumpty's was going to be right now, and just kind of the general layout of it. Night 1 was going to be basically just survive the night with Birthday Boy Blam wandering the building, and that was going to be it. Night 2 was going to be essentially the same thing, except with the beaver and the owl. Everyone said that the beaver needed to return as a zombie or a phantom, and that's an idea that I had before I released One Night at Flumpty's 2. I just didn't want to use it, but it's funny because my friend Jake suggested that the beaver be a mummy, because he has toilet paper. And he is the only one who suggested that idea, and I thought it was great, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to finish the game, but of course I wasn't able to. So, the beaver would not have been a zombie, would not have been a phantom, would have been a mummy. And no one would have seen it coming. It is sad that that idea didn't become a reality, but maybe someone can make it happen. Night 3 was going to be just the Red Man and Grunkfist. Grunkfist was gonna, like, teleport, and the Red Man was gonna mess with equipment or something. Night 4 was going to involve the eyesore, and 2 additional characters that resemble the eyesore, but are just singular corpses rather than a whole dinosaur of corpses, and they were just going to also, like, run around the building, I guess. And they were going to be called Champ and Chump. The reason they would be called Champ and Chump is because of a plot twist that would be revealed before Night 5. The plot twist would be, you see a minigame flashback of yourself, essentially, being the player of the first 2 One Night at Flumpty's games. And Flumpty is, like, beckoning you to a back room where he says, "Come and claim your prize and be my best friend." And then once you're lured into that back room, he says, "Well, in order to be my new best friend, you have to kill your old best friend." Naturally, you would decline this offer because hopefully you're a sane human being, and so Flumpty kills you both, you are the champ, and he is the chump. Then the question is, who is playing the game? Night 5, Flumpty is the only one active, and I was thinking, like, maybe everything could change in Night 5 and it would be crazy, and the biggest idea I had was having the rooms switch places. Like, you would be able to physically see the rooms that are the same size on the map just switch. But dang, would that have been more interesting to look at than to actually play. So, climactic 5th night where you're surviving Flumpty, and he's really, really scary and whatnot, and then I wanted there to be a 6th night. That wasn't an actual night, it was just kind of a thing where you look in a mirror and realize that you have been Flumpty this whole game. The whole thing took place in your consciousness. Golden Flumpty is your alter ego, and you have been tempted to kill all these innocent people because you thought it was a fun game. But now you have faced your demons and realized your faults. I had a few ideas for an ending. One involved Flumpty just flying away from his problems into an endless oblivion. Another one involved Flumpty killing Golden Flumpty, his alter ego, in some weird, like, boss fight sort of thing, which I didn't know how that was going to work out exactly, but after that he would go back in time and undo everything that he did because he can transcend time and space. Another idea that I had was for his immunity to the plot to be, like, this contract, and he rips up the contract, and by doing that he's no longer invincible, and so he would go back to all the people that he hurt over the years and have them get their revenge on him, and as a result he would die and become an egg yolk in the ground, and being redeemed he would fly into the afterlife. I just wanted to have Flumpty fly in one way or another, using the image that I used in the very beginning of the One Night at Flumpty's trailer that I posted whenever I made the first game. I thought it would be kind of a fun way for everything to come full circle. If anyone else wants to make the game and the ending that I could not, feel free. You can make a 1 week at Flumpty's if you want. You can make any number of Flumpty's fan games. You can make fan art. You can use the music that I made for the One Night at Flumpty's games if you want. Like, you have permission to do any of that if you feel like it. I'm just honored that it's come this far, and you're You're all wonderful people. Thank you for everything. If you are at all worried that this means the end of me making games, that's not the case, because making games is my deepest passion. It's something I care about very greatly, and it's something I don't intend on stopping anytime soon. I don't know what I'll do next. All I know is that it's most likely not going to be Flumpty. But it'll be something. We'll see.
Hi, birthday boy Blam. How are you doing? Welcome to my house. Is today your birthday?
Why doesn't your house have any doors?
Oh, I just ate them. I was hungry.
Well, can't you, like, break the rules of time and space and get us out?
Yeah.
Are you going to?
Oh, yeah! Just a second.
Flumpty, I think you forgot someone. Rude? Alright, I guess. I'll just wait for him to come back.
Sorry I'm late. I was at a strip club. Hi, I'm Flumpty Bumpty 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 Bumpty. How are you doing, buddy boy, birthday buddy Blam, birthday boy, birthday birth boy? Blam?
Well, how are you doing?
Say, pal, what are you eating?
Oh, nothing. Just some eggs. I mean, a sandwich.
You definitely said eggs.
No, wait, I did? Oh,
Look at my face. You know, that's rude. If I was eating it, it would be cannibalism.
Yeah, okay.
Don't worry, I'll help you satiate your appetite.
Hey, sorry for the disappointment, everyone, but 1 week of Flumpty's 3 is cancelled.
Hi!
What are you doing here, Flumpty?
Oh, nothing. I just wanted to know when your birthday is.
Well, I've got the hat on, so it must be today.
April 1st?
Wait, April 1st? I thought that was last year.
How old are you anyway, birthday boy?
Boy age?
Then how come your voice is so deep?
P.L.U.S.
Anyway, I got you a gift. It's in this box.
Oh. Well, you know, thanks for, wrapping it. Let's see what we got here. It's a DVD of Groundhog Day starring Bill Murray with JPEG compression for some reason.
Isn't that a fitting gift?
Well,
So tell me, Blam, how come you never seem to grow up?
is this like a good egg, bad egg routine?
You're gonna tell me when your birthday is!
Ah!
I'm just kidding. I know when you were born. I was there. I'm always there.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. You are always there, except for right now. Apparently. I guess you're not here anymore.
To my surprise, people are still talking about One Night at Flumpty's even after all this time. I'm not really sure why. It could be partly because of the silly 1 week at Flumpty's joke animations that I've been making for the past 3 years and uploading on April 1st. Or it could be because Five Nights at Freddy's seems to be making kind of a resurgence. I don't know whether that's because of the AR game or because of speculation about the movie or something. I really have no idea. I haven't been paying much attention, but I have been contacted a number of times with just questions about the backstory of the Flumpty characters and what could be considered lore or canon or whatnot, and I kind of want to clear some of that up, because I think because Flumpty is associated so much with Five Nights at Freddy's that people are looking at it the same way that they look at Freddy's when I feel like maybe they shouldn't. So I just wanted to share my feelings on that. I'll start by talking about the comic that my friends and I made prior to my making One Night at Flumpty's, which the brief explanation that I can give based on what I remember is that the comic started out with two characters, those characters being Blam and Kevin Jr., who was the alternate timeline or alternate universe or future or something version of Blam. I don't remember the details. And they were really the only two main characters. For a while, we were trying to develop some kind of actual story with these characters that made some degree of sense. But after a while, I think I just got tired of trying to make sense of everything, and that's why I invented and incorporated Flumpty Bumpty, this egg who is immune to the plot and can transcend time and space. I plopped him in the comic to completely derail the plot, and it never came back. Like, I was doing everything in my power to prevent the comic from making sense, while at the same time, one of my friends was trying to salvage the plot as much as possible, trying to apply logic to all these illogical things that were happening, and I just didn't see the point. And I bring that up not just because people have asked about the comic, but also because that dynamic that we had is very reminiscent of what I feel like is going on right now. When the joke idea was brought up that Flumpty could be infused into some kind of Five Nights at Freddy's style game, I rolled with the joke with the very same mentality that I had with the comic, which was, I don't want this to make sense. I like this better when it doesn't make sense. And I legitimately didn't think very many people would play it, but once I put the game on GameJolt, it got a lot of attention. When I felt inspired to make the second game, I basically retconned the eyes that were on the floor in the first game and turned them into eyesore in the second game. And because I had basically just invented this new character, I decided to give them a little bit of an explanation in the ending of Hard Boiled mode, which was that the eyesore is made up of Flumpty's past victims, because I thought, you know, that's kind of a creepy detail that might be fun to put in. My intent was not to flesh anything out, I just wanted to keep the story really simple and add a little bit of creep factor, and that was that. It was only after I started seeing people criticize the Flumpty games for not having enough lore that I thought to myself, maybe I should try to force in some lore to satisfy people and see what happens. What happened was, I started developing a game called 1 Week at Flumpty's, and I think you know what happened with that. I already explained my general thought process with that game in the Sad Fate of 1 Week at Flumpty's video, which no longer exists on my channel, but it is still on YouTube. I can say with strong confidence that I will never make the game that I described in that video, and I also do not consider any part of it canon. My heart wasn't in it because I was focusing on the story and not at all on the gameplay, which is the polar opposite mindset that I had with the two games before it, and it felt very disingenuous of me to try to turn the series into something that I firmly believed it wasn't. When I made that really stupid 1 Week at Flumpty's animation that I uploaded on April 1st, it was intended to be a prank, but I also declared it the official 1 Week at Flumpty's, and that part is not an April Fool's joke. That is still true. It is 100% more a representation of what Flumpty is to me than the game was. That also goes for the 1 Week at Flumpty's 2 and 3 animations, which weren't even really intended to be pranks. I just uploaded them on April 1st because I felt like celebrating a silly day with silly videos. At this point, the name of the animated series doesn't even make sense. It's called 1 Week at Flumpty's, but does it even take place over the course of a week? Probably not. Some people have asked why characters like Grunkfist the Clown and the Red Man haven't shown up in the 1 Week at Flumpty's animations, and it's because, despite the titles being very similar, I don't think of them as being in the same continuity as One Night at Flumpty's, or even really being related in any way. They are only meant to be goofy shenanigans between Flumpty and Blam, not too different from the shenanigans that ensued in the comic that my friends and I made. A comic which also didn't have Grunkfist or the Red Man or the Beaver or any of those characters. They didn't even exist yet. They were made solely for the games, and that is where they will stay. And I know a lot of people want concrete in-universe answers to questions like, how old is Birthday Boy Blam? Where did Grunkfist the Clown come from? Why does the Beaver sometimes have knives for feet? How come in the Game Over Easy screens your eyes are prepared like eggs when the eyesore has all of his eyes intact when he's made of the past victims? How was Flumpty made? Who is Golden Flumpty?
The long and the short of it is, One Night at Flumpty's does not have lore. It just doesn't. There is no deeper meaning, no rich history that can somehow be explained in the comics or the animations. The characters have no backstory whatsoever except for the things that are very briefly described in passing statements in-game. Like, the red man drank lava and lived, kinda, the eyesore is made up of past victims, the beaver fell down the toilet and died. That's it, and those details have nothing to do with anything else. Like, it doesn't even matter if those things are true or not. In a completely literal sense, none of it is true. It's fiction. And the whole point of fiction is that it's not real, and it doesn't have to follow real-world logic. It's not going to be as intricate as real life, and we shouldn't expect it to be. Maybe it's different with making a mockumentary or writing historical fiction or something along those lines, but Flumpty is immune to the plot. Because I don't feel like there needs to be a plot. What you see is what you get. And I think that's a good enough place to move on to another topic that has baffled a number of people, which would be Flumpty's grave. I released an image a long time ago stating that Flumpty had canonically died and lost his immunity to the plot. First thing you have to realize is I was in a bad mood that day. I was kind of in a bad mood that whole month for reasons mostly pertaining to Flumpty and Freddy, but also a few things that were happening in my life at the same time. I made that image in an attempt to get people to stop asking me to finish the 1 week at Flumpty's game that I cancelled, and evidently it didn't work because people still ask me that, but yeah, that picture was one in a series of poor decisions that I made around that time. The question is it still canon? Apparently not, because the text on the side says something about me never making anything related to Flumpty ever again, and I've made 3 animations and some various doodles that involve Flumpty since then, so logic would denote that if it was ever canon, it's been retconned. I don't always see retconning as a bad thing. If it wasn't for retconning, the eyesore wouldn't exist. Now, all of this is not to say that I will never make a game that has some kind of a deeper story to it with details that matter. That is something I would like to do someday, but I also don't know if it will happen because I've determined I work much better if I don't design a game around a story. But at least in regards to Flumpty's, there is no lore, there's not supposed to be any lore, and looking for it and trying to make sense of the canon is a lost cause that I don't really recommend. That said, I don't mind if people have headcanons for the characters or for the universe that the game takes place in. That's fine. You will never get a clear in-universe answer from me about why the owl wasn't in the first game, or what the characters' voices are, even whether the monsters are Flumpty's friends. 'Cause I don't know. And I also don't really care. If I'm being totally honest, I just don't. I don't feel like I need to make up answers to satisfy people's questions anymore. If I had answers, I might share them, but I don't. If One Night at Flumpty's had a box, like the one in Five Nights at Freddy's 4, that box would be empty, except for what you put into it. Because the answers to those questions are your fiction, and they can be whatever you want. Years ago, I deleted a video with this thumbnail because it followed the announcement of a game I didn't end up finishing. But now that matters have dramatically changed, I think it's time to replace that video with a new one. One Night at Flumpty's 3 is real, it's not a prank, and I'm going to tell you about that in as much detail as I reasonably can. I was checking my emails one day, took a glance in the trash folder of all places, and discovered an email from Scott Cawthon. I had to make sure it was really him, and the moment I did, I changed my email filters to ensure he never somehow ended up in my trash again. Basically, Scott was getting in contact with some FNAF fangame developers, and wanted to arrange a system where we could profit from our creations, have them be officially ported to major platforms, and potentially also receive merch. Obviously I said heck yeah, and we exchanged a number of emails back and forth discussing the finer details, which I can't talk about because I signed an NDA. I can say that Scott never told me to make a third Flumpty's game, but he told me I could if I wanted to, and I knew if there was ever a time for me to do it, this was that time. If you remember, back in the Flumpty's 2 developer commentary, I said,
if I made a hard-boiled mode of the first One Night at Flumpty's, which I won't,
and
will there be a One Night at Flumpty's 3? I can't entirely dismiss the possibility of one, but I don't think I'll make one.
Which I fully believed at the time. But no one could have seen the Fazbear Fanverse initiative coming, and it is the whole reason I changed my mind. I was still super hesitant about the idea of making a third game. I wasn't sure I would actually do it, but after wrestling with the plans for a good long while, I wholeheartedly believe now that Flumpty's 3 will at least live up to the other 2 games, and hopefully even be a little better, but you can be the judge of that when it comes out. The thing is, I wasn't in charge of when Scott would make the big announcement post on Reddit, and I'm also not in charge of when Flumpty's 3 will release, because it'll have to be at around the same time as the multi-platform ports release, assuming those are successful, and the porting process is going to take a while. This is nobody's fault, but it does scare me a little, because in the lengthy time it takes before Flumpty's 3 comes out, I don't want to accidentally overhype what is going to be a pretty short game. I don't want fans to think it'll be bigger than it actually is. Like, people were upset when Nintendo put out a mini-direct, and that was after they tempered everyone's expectations as much as possible, so imagine what the reaction would have been if they hadn't done that. I'm excited about this game. I really am, and I want you to be excited about it too. I just want you to know what to be excited for, I guess. The basic rundown is, One Night at Flumpty's 3 will be a new game with new mechanics that keeps with the short-form structure of the first 2. I feel like that's kind of what makes them special. The game is fully planned out, and I won't be taking suggestions. You can expect one night, a hard-boiled mode, and almost nothing resembling a plot. I'm also not avoiding using any colors. I'm surprised how many people have asked about that, but I do plan on there being a theme to the colors I use the most. A few ideas from the cancelled 1 week at Flumpty's plans will carry over. I'm not going to say which ones, but I'll tell you some of what won't make the cut, and basically I'm not bringing back any of my past attempts to force lore into this goofy series. I'm not giving the characters backstories. I'm not including the Champ or Chump characters whose existence relied entirely on the cancelled story, and I don't even feel bad about that because they were just discount eyesores anyway. I also won't be using the blind monster idea I had for Flumpty's 2. I tried to work a blind monster into the plans for the new one, but there just isn't a place for it, so if I ever use that idea, it won't be for a FNAF clone. I'm developing One Night at Flumpty's 3 with the intent of it being the final game. From my perspective, this game is more like a side project to tie up a loose end, and it's not one of the main things I'm working on. It won't be a direct parallel of Five Nights at Freddy's 3, but it will have security cameras because, to me, those define the gameplay of FNAF more than anything else. Part of the reason I'd really like to end on 3 is because, honestly, I miss the closure that we all felt when FNAF 3 came out. It wrapped things up so nicely, most of us weren't expecting another game, and I still think the first 3 games are the best ones. Keep in mind, despite it all, I'm actually not much of a FNAF fan anymore, and I mean no disrespect to Scott Cawthon. He is an amazing guy who I am eternally grateful for, but there are a lot of other games and genres I just have more passion for. You should read Scott's Reddit post for a few more details. Expect more teasers eventually on Twitter. I'm not sure exactly when because I don't know when the release date will be. Hopefully this year, but it could go into next year. And I'd love to wind down and not focus my work or my social presence exclusively on Flumpty in that time. I hope that's understandable. I'll add that I'm probably done with the short 1 week at Flumpty's April Fool's animations as well, or at least if I continued those, I'd call them something else, because I want them to end on a 3 as well. The reason they were yearly is because I'm just tired of doing Flumpty's voice. It's not as fun or as easy as it used to be, and I think it would get tiring to hear it too much anyway, so I'm sorry that I'm most likely going to be done with Flumpty's, and this game is kind of a bonus, but I really would like to believe that I'm more than just the Flumpty guy or the Riddle School guy, and I want to try and do other things too. Anyway, thank you for listening. This might be the last update for a while, so I'll see you when I see you. Take care, everyone. Kevin Jr. confirmed.
Disclaimer. Instead of this video being a pure developer commentary over gameplay footage like the ones made for the first 2 games, it will be a fully edited video essay in which I spend most of it talking about the development of ONaF Flumpty 3. This video will contain spoilers and viewer discretion is advised. About 13 years ago now, on the forum I used to frequent, I invented an imaginary user with the name Popular Guy, and the running gag was that every message this user posted would receive at least a dozen upvotes, regardless of what it said. I had to find an avatar for this character I invented, and on a whim, I did an image search for Humpty Dumpty, I'm not really sure why, and found this, which it turns out is from a bit on The Muppet Show. I couldn't tell you why this image worked so well for Popular Guy, but the joke was well received, and I wouldn't be surprised if it left an impression on me that subconsciously led to Flumpty Bumpty years later, who I similarly invented on a whim as a joke. It never would have occurred to me that his popularity would grow to the degree that it has today. One Night at Flumpty's 3, for me, is the end of a very long joke that took on a life of its own. I've made no secret of the conflicting feelings I've had about this goofy little series, but I know I'm not alone when I say it's a rough feeling when your most successful creation, or at least one of them, is something you didn't put your heart into. I made the first game in about 3 weeks to practice software I'd never used before. Not only was it a test parody game based on a series I really only had a passing interest in about 5 years ago, its cast is entirely made up of characters most people seem to have more passion about than I do. A lot of artists refer to their original characters as their children because of how much love and care they put into them, and I definitely feel that way about some of my own characters. But I've never had that experience with Flumpty or Blam or the others. For me, they're just kind of a means to an end. All of this is to say, when I found Scott Cawthon's email about the Fazbear Fanverse initiative in my trash folder, the reason it was there at all is because I had filters in place to automatically delete emails about Flumpty and FNAF, because I had no expectations of doing anything with either of them again. In fact, I had also deleted all the source files for the first 2 games, which made it more difficult when I had to remove all the copyrighted material from them for the official releases, because somebody had to decompile the games for me, and after that, the only way for me to edit the images was to draw over them. So that was fun. I joined the initiative knowing I didn't have to make a 3rd game if I didn't want to. Even still, to me it only made sense to try, because of course, one last game to tie up loose ends for the fans and for myself would make the whole thing more special. So I got started, and this is going to sound strangely familiar, but I started with a dream I had. A few years back, probably about 4 years ago now, 3 or 4, I don't know exactly, I had a dream about a hypothetical 3rd Flumpty game that took place in an empty cabin on a mountain with a blizzard outside. On each of the 4 walls of this cabin was a wide open door Flumpty and Blam would sometimes appear behind, and just looking at them was enough to make them vanish back into the storm. If I had directly translated the stream into game form, the gameplay would have been garbage, because all you'd have to do is spin around in a circle and you'd win. Still, I liked the idea of a real 3rd game taking place in a freezing cold environment, so I made the office a freezer and turned the temperature into a mechanic. In hindsight, I realize the furnace is pretty similar to the music box in FNAF 2, which I have some reservations about, but my hope was that it would feel like a safe zone for the player at first, and then I would introduce a mechanic which shows that not even the one safe zone is truly safe, like any good horror. I knew early on that I wanted to bring back the whole gang from the first 2 games without introducing any new characters, because this final game is sort of their curtain call. I briefly tried to work in the blind monster I left out of Flumpty's 2, but the idea didn't fit then, it didn't fit this time either, it would have felt forced, and it was simply not meant to be. The reason Empty Bumpty is not in the game, by the way, is because by the time I announced the game it was actually already finished, and I just made it sound like it hadn't been started yet because I wanted to give Click Team more time for the ports without people complaining. I don't know, it took a long time anyway. Either way, Empty Bumpty was added to the first game after the 3rd one was already finished, and it was just meant to be a little bonus anyway, nothing really important. Blam, as is tradition, is pretty neutral. He follows a path to the office, and you know he's about to enter when he has the Kevin Jr. pose. Golden Flumpty has always been a reference to Golden Freddy, who is a hallucination. turning him into a hallucination like the ones in FNAF 3 just made sense in my head. Someone had to come out of the furnace, and the red man seemed like the obvious choice because he's associated with fire and lava, although the idea of having him teleport through a portal in the wall was sort of carried over from the Grunkfist portals in the cancelled 1 Week at Flumpty's plans. Several things were carried over from those plans, one of the most obvious things being the snapshot camera, which I repurposed for use in the office instead of the security cameras because I wanted to force players to use the monitor to determine when a character is right outside, and lighting up the darkness in front of you with a flash of light just seemed like a cool way of fending them off. When balancing the game, I felt like there needed to be more of a reason to make every snapshot deliberate, which is why if you flash the light at Grunkfist the impatient clown, he attacks you unlike the other characters. It also worked out well because the room Grunkfist comes out of this time is an exhibit for clown art, which is an idea I was rather happy with, and it makes sense for an art exhibit to have a sign prohibiting flash photography. There was no way I couldn't bring back both the beaver and the owl this time, but one thing I didn't want to carry over from the cancelled 1 week plans was the toilet paper mummy beaver idea, because I knew everybody would be expecting that, and I was right. I also tried to find a way to implement both characters separately without their mechanics being identical, because having every character behave in a unique way is just my preference, but nothing I came up with felt natural. I eventually had the idea to kill off the owl like I killed off the beaver, and combine the corpses of these two functionally very similar characters into one twisted-looking chimera, which felt nice and spooky and didn't sacrifice gameplay. I think Eyesore was the last character whose mechanic I came up with for the first night, because by that point it felt like I'd covered all the bases with the other characters and I didn't know what else to add that would maintain the balance of the mechanics. Most likely what led to me putting Eyesore in the door was the fond, eerie mental image of all those eyes staring at you from the darkness, and I'd say it serves as a nice extra incentive not to look at the security cameras for too long. The number one idea that I absolutely wanted to bring back from the cancelled 1 week plans was a hectic night dedicated entirely to Flumpty with a dramatic shift in tone. Flumpty Night, as I call it, was the whole reason I wanted to make a third game in the first place, even 6 years ago. After all, Flumpty is the namesake of the series. He's immune to the plot, he can transcend time and space. He really should be the scariest character, and I did everything in my power to make that happen. The end result, in my opinion, is even better than I'd always hoped it would be. I'm glad I didn't design this night in the 1 week at Flumpty's days, because I've learned a lot, and I was able to capture exactly the mood I wanted back then, just with better gameplay that handles a lot of the same elements in a different way. I brought back the rooms that swap places on the map, the starry hallway, the laser doors, the room decorated with a bunch of glowing lines. The addition of the dinosaur is my friend's idea. This night combines a lot of new ideas with the best of the plans I had before, and it doubled as fan service, so that's great. It was cathartic, in particular, to animate the spider-legged Flumpty scampering through the vents, because that imagery had been in my head for years, and I was so eager to make it a reality that I'm pretty sure it's one of the first things I made when I got to work on Flumpty Night. I was also excited to make the jump scare, because Flumpty is more or less a reality-bending god of death. So I wanted to make his jump scare look like a Lovecraftian nightmare. Beyond that, I really didn't go in with much of a plan. I just kept writing down ideas in a notebook and adding them along the way until it became utter chaos.
Before I really started brainstorming ideas for this game, I thought that maybe all the monsters could just be variations of Flumpty, just different Easter eggs.
Not gonna lie, I completely forgot I said this until people reminded me after the third game came out.
There was one idea I remember having for Flumpty Night that I didn't include, which was the idea that sometimes the game would randomly appear to lock up or reset or go back to the title screen, like the sanity effects in Eternal Darkness. But as quirky and fitting as that might sound on paper, in practice it would have disrupted the gameplay too much and quickly gotten annoying, so the only sanity effect I implemented was the heads-up display glitching out. the decision to compose an electro swing song for the end of the night came to me while I was listening to Caravan Palace. Go figure. I wanted to greatly outdo the little jingle in the second game while also making reference to it, and I actually thought it would lighten the mood at the end of the night, but after putting it in, I think it just made things more intense, which is even better. I think it wraps up all the mayhem in a nice little bow, and I'm very pleased with how it came out. Flumpty Night is really the climax of the game, and even though Hard-Boiled mode is meant to be the hardest of the 3 nights, I didn't go out of my way to make it the hardest challenge it possibly could be, because narratively it's the falling action, it's the farewell to the characters, and I wanted people to actually be able to beat the night and see the true ending. In Five Nights at Freddy's 3, which always felt like the proper ending of that series to me, the background music of the Shadow Bonnie minigame was a music box cover of a classical piece by Schubert, which in English basically translates to Swan Song No. 4, Serenade. I used that same music box theme in the cancellation video for the 1 Week at Flumpty's game years ago, and it felt appropriate to sort of call back to that for the bittersweet final night of the series. So I made my own cover of Schubert's Serenade, and that's what plays in the game. One of the big reasons the 1 Week at Flumpty's game crashed and burned is I was trying to force lore into a fan game series that I think actually benefits from not having any lore, so the story was not a focus in this one, but it does have just a little bit more story than the others, and I think it fits. It occurred to me that the goal of the player has always been to survive until 6 AM, and technically, the Flumpty series has never ended a night on 6 AM. The first game ended with ham, the second game ended with spam, but never 6. It also occurred to me that this series is called One Night at Flumpty's, and Flumpty is above the laws of time, so I could make the argument that every night in the series is the same one night being reset over and over again with different rules until 6 AM finally arrives and you're free. I was happy with that idea, and it resonated with me on a personal level as well, because in some ways, I've felt trapped with Flumpty and have been waiting for a feeling of release to move on to new things. The final shot of One Night at Flumpty's 3 is a callback to the image I used in the trailer for the first game, and it's the very same shot I had planned to end the 1 Week at Flumpty's game with. Incidentally, now that I've added a hard-boiled mode to the first game, it has 2 nights, the second game has 2 nights, and the third game has 3 nights. That adds up to 7 nights, which is 1 week. So, in an unexpected, roundabout way, we did get to spend 1 week at Flumpty's after all, and I was able to end it how I always wanted. If I'm being honest, in regards to both Flumpty's and the Fazbear Fanverse initiative, it feels like I have more negative memories than positive ones, and maybe that's just because the negative ones stand out more easily. I've felt torn about my relationship with these games, and I think all the Fanverse developers agree that the initiative could have been handled way better than it has been, with unclear communication being perhaps the biggest issue of all. But hopefully, since my games have been the first ones in the lineup, I've run into most of the major problems, and the experience will go more smoothly for the others. Major shout out, by the way, to Phil Morg, who is also part of the Fanverse developing FNAF Plus. I have no idea why Click Team was given the unreasonable task of porting multiple games that weren't made in their own software, but Phil came along and did all the remaining necessary work for the Flumpty ports. He made a stylish menu for the console bundle, and he even found and fixed a few minor glitches that slipped under the radar. I could not have asked for anyone better for the job, and he's frankly the sole reason Flumpty's 3 came out before the death of the universe, so I'm very thankful, very, very, very thankful for his help. An additional shout out to Etches Sketchy, who is a good friend of mine, and also quite possibly the biggest Flumpty fan I've ever known. She has her own original characters who were initially inspired by the One Night at Flumpty's cast, but they're not even fan characters, they're her own distinct characters in her own world that she's creating, and that to me is even more flattering and cool, and she really made the release of the game more rewarding with her infectious enthusiasm. I'd also, of course, like to thank Scott Cawthon for this opportunity. Even though there have been times when I've felt like I don't belong and maybe I shouldn't have joined the initiative at all, and there have been times when I've been confused and frustrated and likely difficult to work with, Scott has been patient with me. He's educated me on certain things and kept my best interest in mind the whole time. Ultimately, when all is said and done, I'm glad that I made One Night at Flumpty's. I'm glad that I joined the fanverse, and I think through this initiative, Scott has made a lot of people's lives a little brighter. Yeah, this is pretty much where my relevance with the fanverse ends, with the possible exception of merch in the future, although I still don't know whether that'll happen or not, so we'll see. My last Flumpty uploads will be the One Night at Flumpty's 3 soundtrack, and then I'll start a new journey. If you're still interested in Five Nights at Freddy's content, you won't be seeing it from me, but you will be seeing it with the other members in the fanverse, so if that tickles your fancy, please buy their games when they come out. They're all cool people with wonderful creative skill, and they deserve your support. With that said, take care, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in whatever we do next.
Hiya, best friend. Wouldn't you know it, after all this time, you still haven't survived until 6 a.m. But if you ever do, I'll finally let you leave. Until then, friends, let's play.
Flumpty Bumpties, it's your time to beat the egg and leave this place behind. Your brain is feeling scrambled, the end is out of sight, but if you hold on longer, you might survive the night.